All right, wait a second. I got to get the got it out of my way. Well, hello, everybody. Here we are. It's the Three Consulting Amigos. And today we're going to do something which I think is fun. You know, for years I've been involved with the Malcolm Baldrige Award. And today we're going to go through their self-assessment, only one piece of it. Before we go into the full assessment, I want to go over the 7 areas that are have been focused on in this. And those are leadership, strategy, customers, measurement and analysis, workforce, operations, and then that's all wrapped together at the end in results. We've taken the assessment and we've put it on a file on our own here. And today we're going to just spend time talking about leadership, looking at each of the questions, and then from our own experience, kind of explain how the questions, whether we strongly agree or disagree, have really enabled the clients we've worked with to improve or what they need to do to get better. So having said that, I'm going to defer a little bit to Ed here. Ed has a specific interest in this, and let's think about the first question, because for you, Ed, this first one has always been kind of significant.
Yeah, I think you have to know what your company is trying to accomplish. I think that's the first step. And I think a lot of times there's no time to look at these types of questions. So when you're doing an evaluation, I think you start there and you work your way down. So I think it's very relevant. And I know a lot of consultants out there spend a lot of time trying to define the mission and trying to use all the right words. But I think more importantly is for everybody in the room, all the members of the team to understand why the organization is in existence and what are you trying to accomplish.
Mm-hmm. Well, Ron, what's been your experience with this?
Yeah, I think Ed's exactly right. I do think that there's a lot of mushiness in the 2 words in management between mission and vision. I like the way they've delineated it here in the Baldrige. What are you trying to accomplish versus where are you trying to go in the future? So that helps delineate. But you know, I think there are some people who focus on, well, our mission is to make a profit, you know, and then there are others that very much, you know, especially now, are focusing on sort of the social aspects of, well, you know, and it gets a little bit ethereal. We only make a profit because we have to stay in business. We're really here to increase the ease of people's lives and through our can openers, you know, or something like that. It's like, you know, they'll take a can opener, something that we use on a regular basis, almost a commodity, and trying to turn it into like, we save the world with our can openers kind of thing, you know? And so I think you can go a little too far on that. And you can lose people. It may inspire some of your frontline workers to think that, you know, the fact that they're the ones putting the red widget on the black widget is helping the can opener save the world. I mean, I suppose there's a little, you know, but I do think that these are just words that are oftentimes, you know, kind of emphasized by consultants, like people like us, to not necessarily to any avail. So it's important within the company to define what the mission is and what the vision is, so you can communicate it. In this particular case, unlike most of these, I don't know if you can compare yourself to other companies, but you certainly can compare yourself to everybody else, say if you're the CEO, to everybody in your organization, to see if they think that they understand it. Now, it may be different, but that's really a place to start. The other questions are, you know, ethical and good work environment, sharing information about, you know, these are more leadership kinds of things that I think are more important in this particular question. And of course, the issue of leadership is even hotly debated.
Yeah, I was going to go back to the focus on this particular one. I can't tell you the number of times I've been in organizations in which, the mission statement is up on the wall. And when I go to the front line and ask them what they think about it, they look at it and say, I have no idea what it means. It has no relevance to me at all. And as a consequence, what I've found is that many times the mission statement is a bad check. It really doesn't have any bearing on what the front line. And in part, it's because of what Ed said, is that good leadership involves people so that they understand what their mission is. And the mission as aggregate, as you said, Ron, means it does something out there in the workplace, maybe not as, quote, noble as you were talking about of changing the world with a can opener. But the point is that everybody has to buy into that and feel like when they're putting that black widget in whatever it is, that they feel good about it and they feel like they are making a difference.
Yeah.
I think that's missing in most of the clients. I was going to ask you to kind of make this so they can see the score on the side.
Okay.
I would give this probably a neutral or a slightly disagree. I don't know how you guys feel. I don't think people do an effective job of explaining what the mission is in most organizations that I'm involved in.
In my experience, very little time was spent in this area.
Mhm.
Was more focused on day-to-day stuff, and very seldom did we get everybody together and talk about the strategic vision of the company and the leadership and the mission and the vision. And I think we missed a big opportunity, and that's why people on the front lines don't know what it is, because first of all, they don't talk about it much in the organization, and number two, sometimes it's a guarded secret rather than an opportunity to engage the workforce.
Mhm.
So,
So
if you can, give it a score there. Put an X in the D in disagree, number 4.
I think I'd give it a number 4. Yeah, I think generally I would disagree that and it's not because, so the question is, well, is it communication or is it a mission that's understandable? One or two or three of those things is in the way.
Right.
And it doesn't help us understand what it is in the way, but it certainly shows that more needs to be done. Now, having said that, I think we all would agree it's vitally important
Yes.
that people do, in fact, know
Right.
what the purpose and the direction. I mean, what are you supposed to do today? I'll
Right.
never forget being in a meeting like this, and we had about 5 or 6 people in a room. It was a large dairy delivery company, and they were talking about new products and, well, what about these new grocery companies that are invading our space and all this kind of stuff. And at some point in the conversation, the owner just said, "Look, here's what we do. We put clean milk in clean bottles and we deliver them the next day. That's what we do."
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
that's very understandable, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
Simple.
Yeah.
And to your point, Ron, I don't think that simplicity is really available to a lot of people. And we've all seen these 1 paragraph long mission statements that are like you said, consultees, right?
Yeah.
It's a bunch of gobbledygook that everybody says, now isn't that pretty?
Right. And so you see, and when you try, and I think this is a hot issue right now,
Mhm.
I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it's a really hot issue with these major companies coming up and saying, "Oh, well, we are no longer here to make profit for our stockholders. We are here for our community. We are here for our employees. We are here to support our employees to go out to the community." And they come up with all of these things. It actually does the reverse. It takes people's eye off the ball.
That's true.
And we have seen some recent new studies that are showing that people are, before we had this big sort of crash in the last 3 weeks in the stock market, people were disinvesting in the companies that had openly said, we're going to look at some of these other things and do some more social stuff, or we're some of the environmental companies that were focused
I
not
think
on
you're
making
talking about
money.
now that they're moving into ESG, environmental, society, and government.
Well, but you see, what I'm saying is that people are including those in their mission statements and their vision. And there's the place where it gets really murky. And
Right.
it's like, well, we don't know exactly what we're doing here. And now it's everything. When you
Yeah.
get into that, it's like we're doing everything. But investors and people who are supporting the company with their money, they want to know what you're doing too. See,
Right.
it's not,
Right. Yeah,
it's,
that's a good point. So
yeah.
in some ways, that's an external customer that you have to really understand and speak to.
Well, in a way, your stockholders and owners are your primary customer.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So can you put in an X in that column 4?
I can try. I don't think it's going to let me. Yeah, for some other reason, your file is not letting me in.
Okay, my apologies. I could have done it from this end, but so we've kind of, I think we've really dug into depth on that. But that leads us to the next question, which
Well,
is,
I do have one other point on leadership. I'd like to,
well, not leadership. I'm just talking about question 1, mission. We
oh,
haven't
okay.
gotten to question 2.
Yeah, okay.
So my hope is that we're going to go through each of these questions in more detail. So my point is, I think we've covered mission, and we agree that most people don't do it. Most companies don't do an effective job, and we'd give them a disagree in terms of the response to this question 1A.
Mm-hmm.
Which brings us to now. I know my organization's vision, what it is trying to do in the future. My experience has been very similar with mission, is that people don't really have a clear idea of where the organization's going, and that starts with the CEO.
That's correct. And I think there's less understanding on point 1B than there is on 1A, because I don't think they ever spend any time focusing on the future. And if you don't plan for something, you're never going to achieve it, because you never put it down on paper and try to achieve it. So I think it's really important. And I like Ron's point that A and B, they're making a distinction between mission and vision. And a lot of times people use those as the same term, and they're not.
Right, and they're not, absolutely.
Yeah.
So what's been our experience with vision in terms of the companies with whom we've worked?
I would go a little bit higher and give them a 3 on this particular one, because I think that there are, and the people that I've worked with for 35 years, which are smaller business owners and families, they're better about talking to their employees about, we got to move forward on this. It's problem solving oriented. It's not grandiose and we're going to change the world. It's pragmatic, but I think that they do a little bit better job. So I would give them a 3 on this particular one, but by and large, they're in the same camp, the first two.
Well, I would use it a little, I would say it a little differently. And the clients that I deal with, very few of them even have a budget. They have no expectations for next year that are different from this year. And I don't see any strategic planning, very limited strategic planning going on, which to me is a real opportunity. If they can do a strategic plan, I think they're going to realize a lot more value for their company.
Well, I think that's true. Are you saying that should be a part of the vision? Because we're still on question 1B.
Yeah, I'm talking about the vision.
Okay.
I kind of call it as a strategic vision of the company, which way you're going.
Right.
Ron's right. I mean, immediate, they're on top of the immediate stuff for the most part. They
Right.
know how they have to do these things to pay the bills. But beyond that, I don't see them doing much more. I don't see numbers going out. I don't see strategies written down. I don't think there's any sharing of that information within the organization. And a lot of times they treat it as confidential information. It's a secret.
Yeah.
And if it's a secret, how can you really generate any type of value from it? Because the value is going to come from the people on the front lines and the middle management group that are going to make it happen.
And in thinking about the vision is kind of looking out in the future and being aware that there are things that are happening in the marketplace that may affect what you're doing today. It may affect your mission.
Excellent point.
I see. I agree with that. And see, being a numbers guy, Ed, you dropped into the strategy category, I think, Whereas I see vision much more as a communicative. I have an idea. I have a dream. It's you don't put numbers to your dream until you
Well,
get
that's a
to
good
those
point.
practices.
I like that idea of
Yeah.
dream big.
That's why well, see, I think the strategy is keeps you from dreaming ridiculous.
I
And,
think you're right on that
and
point.
that's why I'm a little higher on the vision
Yeah.
because I don't include the strategy. I agree with you on how many people are planning for the future. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well,
But
I wonder how many had dreams. How many have ever identified their dreams?
Well, let me use an
yeah.
example here because I think it's so relevant, and we have a victim of it right here with Ed. Basically, since the newspaper industry really didn't see what was going on in the horizon, they didn't have a vision for what was happening in the future. They didn't see that there was the internet that was going to radically change the way people consume news in a matter of weeks or months. And because of that focus on the practical day-to-day, they lost sight of the vision, and they in fact paid a horrible price for it because there was no preparation for what was happening right around them.
Yeah.
I think you can make a point based upon that is kind of like a SWOT analysis. And I know I'm going into strategy, but you gotta, you have to understand your threats. You have to know your dreams.
Yes.
You have to realize your threats and getting to where you want to go.
Well, see, I think that to kind of support Ray's point there, I think that the vision for a lot of newspaper people, 10 and 20 years ago was we're just going to do more of the same because we report the news for tomorrow. We're going to do today's news and we're going to do the same thing tomorrow. Like next week, well, we're just going to grow big and we're going to sell more advertising. But vision includes something bigger than that.
Yeah, exactly.
And so this is a case where out of how many, are there 1,000 big newspapers or reasonable?
Yeah.
There used to be, however, there weren't 5% that understood what the change was going to be.
Yeah.
So the industry as a whole was so stuck in the past in a way that it could not see what was happening right in front of their face. Yeah,
that is very true.
Yeah,
and a lot of people thought it was based upon the number of people you had in the newsroom. If you had the news, everything else would come to bear and you would be able to optimize the company. But we all found out when you change the way you deliver news, it had a profound impact on the newspaper business.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, in that case, instead of owning the news, it's the distribution channel that actually owns it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the point here, my feeling is that on this particular question, 1B, I would give it a 4 or maybe even a 5 because so few organizations really think about what's going on in the future that's going to impact their mission and everything else. And if they don't have a good picture on that, what happens is what happened to Ed's company and the rest of the newspaper industry. I mean, it just literally disappeared in a matter of years. And nobody would have ever thought that was possible. No,
but for every company like that, Ray, don't forget that we had internet companies. We've got 10 or 15 internet companies who did fill the space, who did have that vision. We've got hundreds or thousands of companies that did understand the change of distribution. Amazon being the big kahuna in the room. So you can't tell me that Bezos didn't have a vision.
Yeah. No, I understand. And
you can't tell me that 1,000 other entrepreneurial internet people didn't have a vision too.
Yeah, like Google.
And that's why I'm arguing for at least 3 on that particular one.
Yeah,
to me, it's just a number. But the bottom line is you just, when you have a large cash flow coming in, you're pretty much tied to it in a lot of respects. And it's hard for people to think outside of that way of doing business. And that was a big part of it because you're trying to preserve what you have, right? And so I think you got to be able to preserve what you have, and you have to research new opportunities down the road that can make up for that lost business down the road, because you're not going to change the way the consumer is going to consume that information.
Well, and I think, that's why I'll go along with you. And you can say undecided on this one, but specifically speaking, what we have identified is that this is a key question to the organization future, particularly when they start doing strategic planning, that they really think about, okay, what's happening in the environment that may in fact be hurting us or helping us, and how can we combat that in some effective way to maintain our profit and to maintain the business.
Yeah, well, I guess you see, in that sense, I mean, I think we have to recognize that the industry and the type of business has an awful lot to do with the quote leadership here. These questions from Baldrige are put together in a little bit of an academic way, and that is, well, okay, if you make widgets or can openers, there are certain things that you need to do in order to be able to edge up, your market share just a teeny bit and maintain your major. But if you're in the internet business as of 10 years ago, the leadership is a whole different animal. And look at Elon Musk. I mean, he and Jobs and all of those famous people that we know of, they would go through and take a look at this stuff and they'd go, what are you talking about? No, the point is everything is about the vision, and I will drive that home until my people either quit or I fire them or they get the job done.
Yeah,
So
that's good.
I mean, we have different leadership styles. When you look at the high flyers today that we all know about, and there are little ones as well as big ones, those people have leaders that share that vision in a very big way, and they get a 1 for that, because everybody knows that the digging company is going to dig holes in a mechanized way.
Yeah.
And that the space company is going to go to the moon next. That's what we're going to do.
Right.
Everybody knows, how many cars Tesla is going to make. That's pretty straightforward. That's a leader that makes sure that I mean, if you don't get it, face to face, you get it in his tweets, right?
Right. So, all right. So we're going to give that a 3. Let's look at number C. My senior top leaders are ethical and demonstrate our organization's values. Let me begin by that one. I have worked in a lot of organizations, and I can only think of one instance in which I thought the person was unethical and would have been difficult to work with. In most cases, they even if they may be going in the wrong direction, they're well-meaning and their values tend to be supportive of that.
I agree with that 100%. In my experience, and through the contacts I've worked with directly, hundreds and another 500 or more in companies that I own, I would say that I can only think of 3 or 4 instances of people who are clearly unethical. Particularly the ones that are doing well stand out to me because they all are top on the ethics. They demonstrate it. They're just incredible people. They do what they say what they do. Those are people, and interestingly, in the research I've done on small business over the last 15 years, and since I wrote my book, I have found that the ones who make money are, in fact, almost always highly ethical. So you'll not survive if you can't fit into this. Customers are too smart.
Right.
Yeah.
Ed, how about your experience?
Well, I have to take a little bit of a different opinion on this one. Sometimes companies have incentives, and sometimes companies at the top don't want to hear the truth. They're trying to drum a certain message to the outside, to shareholders, etc. And their jobs are predicated upon it, and they get big bonuses for hitting the numbers. I think a lot of times they put a lot of pressure on people inside of an organization. Of course, I'm talking about big organizations, not a mom and pop here.
Right.
And fortunately, a lot of times people don't have the strength to go up against them and tell them the truth.
Right.
And I've been involved with several high profile frauds, and just about all of them have been caused by that mentality. These
Wow.
are people that are ethical, but they get put in a position to do something that they know isn't right. And I've always, and when I'm closing the books and people tell me to make entries because their bonuses is dependent upon it, I don't care what it is. I say no, but how many people, other people can do that?
Yeah. So what would you, what can we agree is a good score for this? I would give it a 2.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Yeah, that's okay.
All right.
We're doing it as an overall thing. Every company's going to be different.
Right. And I understand that.
And I think as we discovered just among ourselves, the size of the company has a lot to do with it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it does. It does. But I think, part of the leadership is that, as you pointed out, Ron, you get the big companies, the Bezoses and the Jobs and the Bill Gates. It's amazing how good visions and good leadership attracts similar people,
Yeah.
so that they usually have good people as they go along.
Yeah.
And that goes to the next question. My senior leaders create a work environment that helps me do my job. And I think what Ed was saying is that, yes, that's true, but sometimes that can be led in the wrong direction. Is that what I'm hearing you say, Ed? Is that people can be pushed into doing things that are unethical or not necessarily in the best interest of the company?
yeah, I think that was point 1C, but I think 1D is creating a work environment to do their jobs. And I think that's a little bit different. It's, being supportive of the people that work for you and helping them find solutions to problems that they're dealing with. And every time you find one of those solutions, a lot of times it'll add value to the bottom line. But sometimes managers don't spend enough time listening to their people. And Ray, you and I have seen that many times out there in the field, right?
Right. Oh, yeah.
And I think that's not a good thing. That's why I think saying a lot of companies try not to have very many meetings, and I think meetings can be used productively. We've been involved with a couple organizations at 7 o'clock. They're up having their meeting, getting everybody on the same page. And I think it adds a lot to their productivity and helping people solve problems.
Right. Yeah, everybody wants to be involved. So what are we going to, based on our experience, what are we going to give that as a score? My senior leaders create a work environment that helps me do my job.
I'm again, I'm always the sort of skeptic, I suppose, but when I see this, I think about such a wide range. I don't even know what it means. Work environment, is that in a machine shop where you have to stand and it's uncomfortable and hot? Or are we talking about air conditioning in that environment where he still has to stand and at least he's cool? Or on the other hand, are you talking about a friendly environment where people get along and the teams are all working together? And what about the tools that are given to people? Do they have enough tools to get the job done?
Yes.
Or are you, it's like, well, we know that we need to repair that machine so that it works better and won't cut your hand off, but we don't have the budget right now, which may be in fact the case. Right. So this, create a work environment is a big, broad phase. Right. I mean, today people are saying, I don't want you to create me a work environment. I want to stay home. The environment you can give me is access to my work where I am. And so that's going to be a good work environment for me. I have to give this a 3 because I don't have any idea what it means.
I think it's very difficult to do. And I think that it's a broad issue. And but I think the bottom line is if your senior leaders aren't listening to the people that are doing the work, I think it creates a real issue and it needs to be fixed.
Yeah, and I think I was just going to cite something I did preceding weeks in which I found this place completely littered with vinyl trimmings and asked why they hadn't cleaned it up. And they said, we don't have a broom, and so, part of that is that's not a good working environment. And that's literally a function of leadership saying, can we give people access to the things they need?
Mhm.
That goes back to the real question of listening to people and trying to understand them.
Well, maybe another way of looking at this is how many senior leadership groups are disconnected or so far removed from what's going on the floor that they just don't have a clue what the heck's going on. And
Yeah, yeah.
I think we run into a lot of that too.
Oh, sure. No, that's definitely true. They don't know what to do, and therefore the work environment, in so many little ways, not the big ones. They get enough work done to keep the company profitable.
But that's it.
But are they keeping them satisfied so that they don't get poached by another company in this environment where people are, offering astounding amounts of money in order to get them to switch jobs? And which one of those and we know that employees will switch a nice environment for more money. So I'm just saying, what does work environment mean, and how does that actually impact the employee? So they can try to create a work environment, but they may actually attempt to do that but fail. See, or they may not work very hard at it, but have created a nice enough or wonderful work environment that the employee thinks is great. So this is a tough question. But again, we have to remember, this is about comparing top leadership with everybody else. So, but I'd have to say, yeah, I don't really know on that.
So you give it a 3.
Yeah,
I think,
3 or 2
if I
or
could
3.
add one more thing, and it goes back to what I think, all of us were saying in general, is that the better the leadership is able to understand one another and work together as a team, the more they're able to provide things that are meaningful to the end goal and mission, which is we need to sell more widgets. Whatever that is, and when a leadership team is effective at that, they start encouraging people and people start responding. The truth is, when you get down to the front line, those people don't think they have a reason to say anything, and they won't say anything unless they're specifically asked, because they don't see it as their place.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So let's look at number E. My organization's leaders share information about the organization.
I think that, again, I hate to be the middle of the road here, but I'm undecided about that again, because I think that this is not divided by size. This is divided on the personality of the leader. If it is a private company and they're very sensitive about competitors, understanding them more, knowing that their numbers, or if they happen to be a pretty successful and high profit organization, they have a policy of, I'm not going to share this information with them. Their job is to come do their job, and I pay them, what we agreed on. Then on the other hand, you have very open leaders that do exactly the opposite and share everything, finances, the whole bit. So that, now those people sometimes they get a lot of help if they're losing money, and they get a lot of hassle if they're making a lot of money, because you got people saying, I need to make more money. So you see, there's a really interesting balance about which information it is. Now, again, this is an individual, might be a mid-level person, and if the mid-level person's answering this question, are my bosses and their bosses sharing enough information to me, whatever I think? And if I happen to be a business-oriented guy, I'd like to know everything about the business, including the P&L, right? Yeah. But if I'm just a guy who wants to come to work and do a good job and be proud of the job I do and get paid a fair wage, I'm not sure I want to hear that information. I want to know we're going to stay in business. I want to know some sort of raises are out there, what I need to do to achieve a little bit better raise or better position, if in fact I'm there. So you see, I mean, there's such a broad difference there. Yeah.
Right. Or where can I get a broom?
Yeah. Or where is the broom you promised me? Yeah. Yeah.
So what are we going to give it a score? I think you said 3.
Yeah.
Ed, how about you?
Yeah, I think my experience again, and maybe I've worked at really different types of companies, but I've everywhere I've worked, everybody's trying is guarding what they
Hmm.
share with other people.
Okay, so you
And
give it a 4?
No, I don't think they share whatever that would be. I
That's
don't
a
think,
disagree. Yeah,
yeah. I think that's a problem. I'm not saying that I don't think you need to share everything with the front line on every particular thing, but I think the management team has to be closely aligned and know what's going on and I understand where the company sits, the actual position, not so much the make-believe position, but how are we doing? People need to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think to your point, this just brought up something that I've seen too many times. Because a good CEO is dependent on information internally as well as externally. I can't tell you the number of times I've seen CEOs make decisions based on thinking he had all the information he needed, only to discover after he made the decision that people have been withholding, as you said, Ed. I don't want to tell them that. If I tell them that, it'll affect my job. And so they go out and make this decision that has a profoundly negative impact on the company.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in that area, I've seen people come in one day and say, we need to buy this or buy that with no justification at all. They just
Yeah.
had an epiphany during the nighttime and came in and said, this is what we gotta do.
That was that was a vision that they had.
Yeah, I need $1 million tomorrow. I want to buy this piece of equipment.
Right.
What's the justification? Well, I don't have it. I just
Yeah,
believe that we need this piece of equipment.
that's right.
That's right. Wow, that's good. Okay, guys, we're almost at 10 o'clock, so let's wrap up on the next one. My organization asks what I think.
I don't think very many do it. I would have to say disagree, or maybe
Yeah,
strongly. I don't think very many organizations. Now there are individuals in organizations that will do that, maybe on their own specific jobs, but I don't know how much feedback is really asked for, especially formally.
Yeah.
Formally, there's not very much done at all.
Yeah. No, and see, and I think the good point about that, and we've talked about this in preceding episodes, is how do you structure a communication so that information is being fed back and forth in some meaningful way, and there's ways of doing that. So Ed, your thoughts are the same on this?
I agree with Ron on this, and yeah. I do have one other point on all these I wanted to raise as a question to you two and see what you thought. To me, as in all of our previous episodes, we've talked about how important the relationship of a relationship with the customer is, and are we doing what the customer wants to be done, or how are we performing? Does that at all fit into any of this or not? To me, it does, but maybe not to you two.
Well, the customer, if we want to go back to Drucker, leadership's job is to do what Drucker says, which is to get a customer and innovate. And so if leadership does not get the customer, the leadership is not leadership. You need new leadership. Yeah.
I think we need to add some type of point on here about the status with what's the vision of the customers and the status of the customer.
I think you're kind of jumping ahead here. There's you can see.
Yeah, but it is, to me, it's more than having a separate section. It's part of the leadership of the company. That's the way I feel anyway. I might be in the minority on that.
Well, you might say, does leadership clearly understand the customer or the customer profile or the customer needs? You might ask a question like that, which, and then of course the customer section does get into this in more detail.
Right, and I think my suggestion or thought on that particular question, Ed, is that's the purpose of the vision and the mission. You don't have either of those without having a target to shoot at. I mean, one of the things that I really liked about Ron's book is, you have to find a crack in the marketplace. If you don't understand how your company can succeed by being able to go after a specific set of customers, you're dead in the water.
The only thing I would like to have the word customer somewhere in the leadership.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that customer is so important that leadership needs to be responding to the customer, and there's not a single question about that here. Now, I think, and we'll talk more about this, but I think this particular tool, while I really like it, it's a little bit academic in the sense that it doesn't get to the heart of the way real business works, which is solving customers' problems. And if that's the most important thing, now, of course, I'll have to say, Drucker was an academic, and so he's the one who said that. But as also one of the most notorious consultants of all time, he's the one that said a business is in business to find a customer, and so the leadership have to know that, or they just won't be around very long anyway if they don't. But yeah, it's a little strange that there's not a thing about customers under leadership.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I think this has been really illuminating. I mean, think about how much conversation we were able to have on this specific area alone. And I think one of the values of this, if it can engage people in these kinds of conversations internally, it can have a huge impact because it focuses on the things that are important. And even the things, as you just pointed out, Ed, that may be missing that should come out in a conversation like this.
Absolutely.
You got
So
good. So we'll continue on next time. Thank you, Ray.
yeah, no, I think this was good. Thank you again, guys. And to our audience out there, everybody have a good weekend. Thank you, Ed and Ron, for your insights as usual. And we'll see you next week.